Hello, everyone. This is Yu Tsai. Welcome to Let's Talk, and thank you guys for again joining me here. And what a crazy time that we're going through right now. But I'm so appreciative of you guys being here. And in continued celebration of Asian American Pacific Islander Heritage Month, my guest today require zero introduction. She is a war journalist and author, Lisa Ling. Thank you for being here today.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it. And I do also appreciate all the great conversations you've been having during this uncertain times.
Well, let's dive right into it. We can't ignore the fact that we're going through such a crazy time right now. The whole entire week, I've been here celebrating Asian heritage, celebrating inclusion, and making awareness of that. And on the real world side of it, outside the digital world, we're still battling that every single day, not just the Asian community, the Black community and Muslim community, and everywhere. And you have been such a resounding voice as activism for that throughout your entire career. How do you see that we're going to get through this?
Well, you're absolutely right. And I heavy heart over the last few days, weeks. It wasn't hard enough to be going through a global pandemic unlike anything we have experienced in our lifetime. The seeds of racism that have been sown throughout this crisis for Asian people, but for communities of color, particularly the African American community, these systematic injustices are being magnified by COVID. And what we've seen over the past couple of weeks has been horrifying. But what I keep thinking about is how these kinds of incidences, excessive force by law enforcement,
quote, vigilante justice.
These things have been happening for generations. It's just now people are empowered with cell phone video to be able to expose it to the world. What happened to Christian Cooper in Central Park in New York? When I saw that video of that woman screaming that an African American man was attacking her, I was appalled, absolutely appalled, especially if you listen to how calm he was before she actually made that call. And I get right now, I understand that there's so much tension in the air, right? There's so much vitriol, there's so much hostility. And the sad thing about all of this is that we're so lacking in leadership. I think right now we as a culture are just so hungry for leadership and for people to inspire us to do better and to be better. And while there are people who are starting to urge through this and using their platforms and using their voices to do the right things, to advocate for justice on a political level, we're seeing so much the hostility stemming from the highest levels of government and almost giving license to attacks and abuse. And that's really scary to me. So yes, I've had an incredibly heavy heart, but my hope is that something tangible comes from this. On the one hand, while I have been so aghast and heartsick and appalled by so many of the videos of police brutality, I've also seen this overwhelming outpouring of support from people of all different ethnicities, advocating for people of color, advocating for change. And that is giving me hope. I'm looking at this time right now, and this is a defining moment.
Yes.
It is absolutely. It may be the most defining moment of certainly of this generation. And we're going to think back on this time, and we're going to wonder. We're going to think about like what the role that we played, right? Whether we spoke out for justice and for the things that are right, or if we just kind of crawled away into the corner. We're going to remember this time, and we're going to tell this story to our kids and to younger generations, and they're going to ask us, well, where did you come down on this? And I know that I don't want to say, well, I didn't say anything, I didn't do anything. I know that for my own kids, I want to be able to look them in the eyes and say to them, I stood for my fellow humans. I'm standing up for our shared humanity.
But that's been the entire career and entire journey. That is your emblem for everything you have done, and I think it's, one of the reasons that I contacted you and asked you to come on the show, and I was really scared and nervous because you have been incredible idol for me growing up and my entire family. We looked at on TV, there was Connie Chung, and then there was nobody else. And then there was you. And I remember even watching these footage of you and Anderson Cooper at Channel One. And there was me, a young age, looking at that and then looking at Mickey Mouse Club. And I'm like, I want to be on this camp. I want to be on Lisa camp. And it was very incredible for me watching at that time. And I was very oblivious about Asian culture because I think we were young. We pushed that away from us. We're trying to blend in as much as we can. And as we get mature, we know that blending in doesn't solve any problems. You actually want to stand out. And that's the time and that I had to learn. And you said it exactly right, that during this time is such a pivotal point for people to define what their value, what they do. And one of the main reasons, and we talked about this, why even doing this show, why would I extend an invite to people I don't even think would talk to me, is that I realized that I have a voice and have a responsibility with a platform that I've built through reality TV or celebrity photography or whatnot, and for a greater use. We here on the show raising money to buy masks. We donated over 100,000 masks up to today, and we're still raising money for that. And very little that you can do. And I have this philosophy in my head that because we have the 6 feet distance separation rule, I feel like that 6 feet is also the same responsibility for you to share kindness. Instead of having the idea that we're constantly now pushing people away, that 6 feet is the same distance that you can share happy thoughts. You can still smile at people. And if this show, being here, be able to be with you and share some positivity throughout this, then at service purpose. So thank you for being here with me today.
I really appreciate it. And I also, I love that you have been full in celebration of Asian Pacific Heritage Month. It really is so much to celebrate. The Asian community, so incredibly diverse. Wherever you are from in Asia or wherever your ancestors derive from, we're talking about just the most rich histories and culture. And so I so appreciate you celebrating Asian culture. But during this time, though, I think it's also really important for us Asian Americans to never forget that while we may have been born in this country and feel as American as anyone else, American history hasn't always been kind to Asian people. Japanese Americans were the only ethnic group to ever be forced to live in internment camps throughout World War II. I mean, when you think about that now, it's like unfathomable. The entire ethnic group of people were forced to live in internment camps. And the sad reality is that these people lost everything. They lost their businesses, their homes, and then when they were finally released, they just kind of went back into society and they didn't raise their voices until much, much later. We can't do that. We have to be vocal. We have to be vocal when there are injustices being perpetrated on us and to all communities.
We have to band together to speak
out against those injustices and demand our seat at the table as Americans.
And then I saw that action from your post on Act to Change. The moment when I saw that post, I knew to reach out to you, and I reached out to Malik as well. And Malik is coming on in 2 weeks to talk about Act to Change, and I'm so excited to have him just talk about that initiative. He is exemplifying what a human being should do, have a voice at LGBTQ community, and expanding the Act to Change, not just about Asians, it's about Muslims, it's about every color under the rainbow that we should all recognize and include. And Asians have such a deep culture. When we start looking to each other, when we begin find each other looking alike, we find similarity historically as well. And I remember watching an episode that you did pretty early on, This Is Live, that you interviewed Chinese in America. And I remember, I'm going to really relate to this story. Then I start watching and I didn't relate to any of it because they were the richest Asian people in the world. But however, there was a moment you were sharing with your aunt that you were talking about your grandfather, that he had NYU degree, MBA from University of Colorado, and yet he could not find work. Then he opened a Chinese restaurant, the only one in that town.
in 48 before the communists took over in China, the few Chinese able to pursue higher education in the U.S. So he had, an MBA. Finally, escaped from China to come to the United States in 1948. He could not be hired in California for a job in finance because he was Chinese. And so my grandmother, who had a music degree from Cambridge, ended up carrying the entire family on her back teaching piano until they could generate enough money to open the first Chinese restaurant in Folsom, California. And that's the story for so many Asian immigrants. In so many ways, Chinese restaurants, Asian restaurants have become as ubiquitous as McDonald's. The restaurants are a path forward in achieving the American dream. And even though many people who pursue that path, who are immigrants, don't have the pedigree that my grandfather did, it gave him and my grandmother an opportunity to achieve a little bit of the American dream. I don't know that they actually achieved it because they had a very, very hard life here. But they
gave so much hope.
Yeah, and they were able to have a decent living.
Well, it's a reflection of my family because we came from Taiwan, and my dad was a well-known photographer in Taiwan, a small country, but he had different studios. He worked on billboards. And when we moved to the United States, we landed in Terre Haute, Indiana. And he could not get any work as a photographer because of language barriers. So ended up being a dishwasher at my uncle's Chinese restaurant. So when I heard that story, I just find that we all have this common thread that as immigrants, that you do what you have to do. Doesn't matter what your educational background is. It's about providing and about working really, really hard to provide for your family. And which leads to the subject I want to ask you about is that you brought up in America, but you celebrate Asian culture so much. I know you're teaching your kids Mandarin as well. Do you ever feel this thing we call the Asian guilt, where you go, mom and daddy, grandpa and grandma worked their way so hard to come to this country, therefore I need to do the same, and I need to teach my next generation to follow through?
Well, I certainly do put pressure on my kids. I guess that's sort of
just the way I am.
I grew up really I really hated being Chinese. I really hated being Asian because I grew up in a community probably pretty similar to Terre Haute.
Yeah.
I'm in Sacramento, where there were
very few Asian people. I was made fun of a lot.
I was called Lisa Ling on a daily basis because I didn't look like anyone who lived around me, right? So I grew up conflicted about who I was, but I never felt totally American.
Because I couldn't really relate to them, I was consistently reminded of my differences. It wasn't until I moved to Los Angeles, which is hugely diverse.
Our American values are ingrained in us, but yet we come from cultures that are incredibly storied and rich. And that helped me sort of get over that identity crisis. And now it's so important for me to expose my own kids to as much diversity as possible. I don't live currently in the most diverse part of Los Angeles, but because of that, I try intentionally to expose my kids to as much diversity as I can. That's something that's really, really important to me, and to communicate stories. I mean, my eldest daughter is 7 years old, and she knows about internment camps. She can recite passages from MLK's speeches.
Wow.
I tried to paper newspapers. Someone the other day was like, "What are those?" But on the front page of the newspaper was an image of Minneapolis inflamed. And my eldest daughter, who's very sensitive, kept asking me, "What is that? What is that?" And I said, "Well, I'll tell you about it later. It's kind of, I don't really know how I can talk about that." And she kept insisting that I explain to her, because she's sensitive. When I was talking to her about, the history of racism in this country and police brutality, and then I just lost it. I absolutely lost it, that in 2020, that I had to have this conversation. And, she has kids in her class who are Black, right? And to have the discussion that historically people have not been treated fairly. And I remember once when I was talking to her about of racism, talking about racism in this country. We were talking about MLK and the injustices in the Black community. She said, well, yellow people, our people, they haven't experienced anything like that, have they? I said to her, what Asian people in America have experienced
cannot compare to what
African Americans have experienced in this country. Like, there's absolutely no comparison, but you need to know. And she was like 5.5 at the time, that his has not been kind to Asians. And it's something that I think all Asians just always need to retain in the back of their mind, because it to me, it's something that is a really grounding force in my life.
Well, it's interesting to hear, because at such a young age, you're already planting the seeds for your daughter, and she obviously is your DNA. She's already so inquisitive, which is what makes Lisa Ling so amazing. And what she does is the inquisitiveness that you have, the storytelling ability, and your daughter's already learning all that. But when you were young, at 19, you started hosting war zone stories already. How did you able to do this? Because when I talk to my sister and my cousins, and by the way, they're the biggest fan, and I promise to give them a shout out, and they're both now biomedical science PhD doctors, and they're both working in labs as creating testing kits for COVID, and also one of them is working on vaccines. So they actually invite you if you ever want to have a conversation or meet them at the lab to understand how the process works, because they know the show that road to vaccine that you've been so vocal about. They extend that invitation to you. Don't ask me those things, I won't know. I'm just related by blood, but they are incredibly knowledgeable. But so when I watched my sister growing up, looking at television, trying to define what fits her, but now we have lucky enough that we can find them. But at 19, when you're in the state of not loving being Asian, at the same time you put yourself in the most vulnerable stage at war zones and delivering news in front of television, and your opposite side is a white guy, Anderson Cooper. How was that for you? Because for me, before I got into TV, I always asked, do I belong there? Does it make sense?
Yeah, for me, I was lucky. I got hired to be a reporter for a show that was seen in schools across the country called Channel One News. It was a news broadcast. Anderson Cooper was one of my colleagues on that show. And because I didn't grow up with a lot of money, we didn't get an opportunity to travel much when I was a kid. This show sent me all over the world to cover stories. And most eye-opening experience I could have ever dreamt of. And it not only made me a smarter person, it made me a more well-rounded person, and a more compassionate person. And that desire to want to communicate stories to a bigger audience was ingrained in me at a very young age. I almost felt like, given the things I've seen, like 8-year-old boys armed with Kalashnikovs, um, uh, soldiers cooking in cocaine labs in the middle of the jungles in Colombia. So many things that I saw, I recognize, like, I'm seeing these things for a reason. I felt it was incumbent upon me to try and communicate what I was seeing. And I feel as defiant as ever about that kind of storytelling, even though I don't do as much global storytelling, because we have gotten to a place right now, and I'm as guilty as anyone, where we follow on social media the people who espouse our views, and that's it, right? And so when you do that, your worldview becomes so small. And when you try and hear, try and understand what people who don't share your beliefs think, you automatically just discount it, right? And that's really dangerous. And that's, as a culture, what we're becoming. I don't see how that's any different from like North Korea. In North Korea, there are prevented from knowing what's happening in the rest of the world. The only books that they read, the shows that they watch on TV are about North Korea's struggle against the rest of the world. Well, for us, when we choose only to follow the people who espouse our own views, how is that any different? And so for me, as a young person, I recognize the importance of being able to see things with my own eyes, but also sharing them with a bigger audience. Lucky to be able to continue that into my life and career. And my show that I executive produce and host on CNN, This Is Life, is really not very different from the work that I was doing at Channel One 20 some years ago. I'm just aging myself. The goal is to try and allow people to better understand their fellow humans. You know, it's really interesting to think about with all of this chaos happening right now. We have ownership of this planet, right? As human beings, we have just as much right to our services in our country. We are just as much a global citizen as anyone else. But for some reason, some cultures, right, some races have been designated superior over others, and that's change. And I think that we have this really unique opportunity. It's almost like the universe is telling us right now that we better come together, right? We better hold each other's hand through this, or there's going to be. I'm afraid of what the consequences of all of this could be, and I do have hope that people are heeding all of this and will come together and stand up holding hands against injustices toward our fellow human.
Well, not only do you always celebrate the injustice and put them in the front light for everybody to see, we know from early show from Our America on then on CNN, This Is Life. And you cover a lot of subject that for me was fascinating because they were very atypical for Asian culture. Not because, of course, Lisa, you are an amazing journalist, but from an Asian person, I always go, oh, it's an Asian journalist. And I'm not trying to categorize it, but it's just a reflection of somebody I can relate. But then when I see the subject matter who, at the time younger, are afraid to even talk about myself, transgender, the swingers, the gay cowboys, you were touching on every subject matter that I think is what Asian mom said will never talk about. How do you find those stories and why do they fascinate you?
Oh man, you know, one of the proudest moments in my entire career was when Exodus International, which was the largest ex-gay organization in the world. This was an organization that that practiced conversion therapy and tried to convert people who thought they were gay to straight, right? Through this really just insidious kind of thing. And I interviewed the former head of it, and I asked him, you know, all in the name of God, by the way. And I asked him, you know, if God is such a loving God, then do you think you will see gay Christians in heaven? If God loves everyone? And he couldn't really answer the question. He kind of stumbled and he just was a bit of at a loss for words. I mean, I'm surprised no one had ever asked him that question before. Maybe because he was doing it in front of a television audience. I don't know. But a couple of years later, he called me to tell me I'm shutting the whole organization down.
Wow.
If my God, the God that I believe in, is that loving God that I profess that he is, then of course he's going to love and accept people, whoever they are, whatever their sexual orientation is. And to this day, it truly was one of the proudest moments of my life. And in fact, so many of those people who worked for Exodus are some of the most incredible advocates now for gay rights. It's amazing because it's true. I mean, you know, especially those gay Christians, like if you believe in this God that loves you unconditionally, right? Then he or she will love you no matter who you are. And if you are the perfect creation, right, of God's, then he will love you no matter who you are. I interviewed people who are gender fluid a couple of years ago for This Is Life. That was also one of my favorite episodes. And, you know, so one of the reasons why I love doing the kind of work that I do is I am forced to think about my own preconceived ideas. I interviewed a man named Steve who spent his whole life living as a man, but when he was a little kid would sneak into his mom's closet to wear her clothes. And, you know, he always thought that it was sinful behavior, right? Um, and so he's actually a professor in the Bay Area and married with a child. And he where his wife caught him wearing her clothes and wearing her makeup, and he said it was time to come out. And his wife, like, so loving to him, and said to me, like, I love him for who he is, and has still stayed with him and still loves him. I mean, I know it's hard for her, right? I know it's hard for her because immediately she's thinking, like, what does that mean for me? Is he going to leave me? Because she loves him, just wanted him to be happy in his own skin. He beard, looked like, you know, the average Joe guy, and he put on a dress, he put on makeup, and I see this twinkle in his eye, like he felt beautiful. He felt like himself, right? And I remember thinking to myself, if I were to see this guy on the street, I probably would have thought, like, that's a confused guy, you know what I mean? And just I probably would have judged him, because that's just what we do as humans, right?
And it's so poignant what you said, because one of the most important questions when I was thinking about how do I talk to Lisa, how do I ask questions about Lisa, and I got a big bold letter here taped right behind the phone to remind myself, how does Lisa approach a subject matter without preconceptual judgments? Because I know I read so much stuff about from your book that where you always go into every situation, every reporting, every story without judgment. But my curiosity is that I know you don't have judgment because I watch you and I watch how vulnerable you get. There are moments.
I do. I do. I mean, I think we all do. But
And that's what I want to know is what is that balance? And most importantly, if you were able to go into a story without judgments, but when you exit that story, what do you take with you and how does that influence you? If you have no judgment, how do you grow from that?
So we all have judgment. You know, I try really, really hard to be as
non-judgmental,
but we are products of our environment. And so we've been
predisposed
feelings about people or about a culture or what have you. It takes that little opening, right? That little part of your brain that allows you to say, let me just think about this person's perspective. Let me just try for a few moments to just pause and take my own thoughts and judgments out of this and just listen. Like, that is one of the most important skills that you could ever have. Hear someone's story, whether he or she is a Republican or a Democrat or whatever, you know, someone who couldn't be more different from you. You will start to see, you will start to understand him or her better. It's inevitable. And so that's what I've always tried to do, you know. And the thing about Steve that I was going to say is, even though I probably would have judged him if I had seen him walking down the street, I didn't even see the dress. I didn't even see the makeup. I just saw a human being. And I wish and hope that we can all start to see each other, not, you know, not as someone who has different color skin. I mean, it's unavoidable. You have to recognize that, but to really recognize people for the humans that they are. I mean,
Wow, that is so poignant because, you know, for all the episodes, and I've seen every single one of them because I love them. And what you just said reminded me of this episode that where you immerse yourself into the story so much that you became physically naked in front of the mirror. And when I watched that, my jaw was dropped. But first of all, a journalist, activist, feminist, who is non-judgmental into a story. And that was a moment I saw the most human Lisa I've ever seen because you immerse yourself into that episode. Share that with people because I cannot do justice. It was so incredible.
That was an episode that we did about sexual healing. You know, so many of us, particularly Asians, right, are I think many hang-ups about sex. We don't talk about it openly. It's never communicated to us. It was never something that was conveyed to be pleasurable. It was always like you had to sort of talk about it privately. I mean, it's
shame. There's a shame around it.
We live in such a puritanical culture, and as a result, I think that we start to have so many body images, and we put up these blocks to the idea of being a free sexual being, right? In this process of doing this piece about sexual healing, I met this Tantra expert who said, if you have any deficiencies in your sex life, right? You're not having sex with your partner, you may have had a traumatizing experience, if you have experienced rejection, if your parents were divorced, whatever it is, if you have any blockage to your sexuality, it affects every aspect of your life, your personal relationships, your job, because your sexuality is innate within you. And so I was profiling this young man who had cerebral palsy. If you know what cerebral palsy does to your body, you know, it's severely you become severely disfigured. This young man went to a therapist to learn how to embrace himself, his body, his sexuality. And there was an exercise where he and the therapist become completely naked. They take off all their clothes and they look at their bodies and talk about all the things they like and what they don't like about their bodies. And I watched this young man who was totally naked with cerebral palsy. Again, it is a disorder that disfigures your body. And as I watched him talk about the things that he likes about his body, that he was proud of, I thought to myself, then why am I so ashamed of my own body? And it was not my intention when I woke up that morning to do what I did, but I said, I need to take off all my clothes right now and stand alongside you and stand right next to you, because there is no reason why I should feel ashamed of my body, because this is my body. This is the body that I was born with. And we all have these bodies, and we should be proud of our bodies, because it would be impossible to be Giselle or, you know, so many of the models that you interview. Like it's humanly impossible to have someone else's body, but yet those are the bodies that we are promoting in our culture. And it was one of the most terrifying but liberating things that I have done. My cameraman and my sound man were like, okay. But it was at that moment, I just felt compelled to do it as I watched that young man. So it was crazy, but it was really liberating.
But it was such a pivotal moment for a viewer like me, because when I watch a show, when I go through the journey with you in this life, we all take a little bit of that and relate to our life. And truly I love how every episode ends, not with I told you so, or not with this is how you should live your life, but it makes you celebrate with them. And I just literally, before we're gonna talk, I finished the transgender beauty contest one. Oh my God. So I'm like, my producers with me today, I said to them, I go, we need to photograph all these beautiful women. Why am I not photographing them?
I was with them. I was like, seriously, like you all have the most rockin' bodies. Like, come on.
So unfair.
Like how? When? A beautiful experience as well, because all of those women, you know, they grew up being harassed, and I mean, you could just, when they told their stories, just hear them, their voices shaking when they talked about how conflicted they were about their gender identity as children, and to be able to be so free and compete in this pageant, just exude their fabulousness, it was awesome. And you should photograph them, because they are inside, by the way, though.
I absolutely. But now with all the injustice, we talk about diversity, we talk about skin color, we talk about our heritage, and this across the board, we know what's outside of this digital box right now. Do you have this, as a journalist, as an activist, aren't you sitting on your edge of seat, like, let me get out there and tell the story. I want to be out there right now.
Yeah, because of coronavirus, I'm not able to report. All of my work is travel based, so it's driving me crazy. I mean, on the one hand, I've loved my family, and I've been lucky to be home with my family. There's so many essential workers who have not been able to be with their family, or they have to leave their family to go work in hospitals or in healthcare or in the sanitation world. But I am so eager to get out there and report. And I even thought about getting myself infected.
Oh no, no! You need to talk to my sister Becky and my cousin Kimmy. They're gonna give you a lecture.
I sort of say that in jest, but I work with all these young journalists who support me, and we seriously were conspiring. Like, should we get a house together and all get infected? We can take care of each other, and then we can hit the road. But my husband, who's a doctor, is like, "Are you crazy?" But I know he was thinking, "Are you crazy to leave both kids with me by myself?"
Oh my goodness. But is there a healing process, the work that you're doing now with Road to Vaccine? I watch it. I feel like this is part of your journey of therapy too. Just knowing that if you can't help on the front line, but you're delivering amazing information out there.
Yeah, so I'm hosting the show called The Road to a Vaccine. It's a show produced by Johnson and Johnson, and I typically would not do something that is branded. But right now, the past few months, all I've been doing is reading incessantly. I just started reading my first book a couple of weeks ago because at night all I'm doing is just reading about COVID. And so I got the opportunity and I was asked to host this show. I sort of jumped at it because I've been given this opportunity to interview the world's foremost scientists and healthcare experts about exactly what's going on. And it has been such an incredible education for me. And I think that so many of us right now are just hungry to want to know as much as we can. And so to be able to provide people who don't have a science background like me or your sister or you, even though you're a scientist, has been an incredible learning experience for me.
What's next? I know the show's coming. I'm so glad because I remember just a couple of weeks ago when we talked, and you said we don't know when the show's going to air. The next season's coming. So tell us, what can we expect the next season, which is coming around the corner?
Yes. Well, we've already shot our 7th season, and I got to tell you, they are incredible episodes. They are episodes that will make you cry, will make you laugh, will make you experience the whole range of emotions, because at the end of the day, this is life, right? That is what we experience day to day. They're important stories that I'm so eager to get out there. I can't tell you too much about what they are. I'm not sure when they're going to air. I mean, coronavirus has kind of thrown television programming completely out of whack. But I do hope that people will seek it out. If you're interested in previous episodes, all 6 seasons prior are now available on HBO Max. They're also available for purchase on Apple and Amazon. But I feel like, given this discord that we're experiencing in our country right now, those kinds of shows that introduce us to people who are different from us, I think there's never been more of an important time to
Absolutely.
the shows.
And it's because of your show and because the message that you put out there is a constant reminder for someone like me that what my responsibility has to be. And yes, I'm in a fashion business and I shoot beautiful models, but because of the path that you have paved for other Asians, when I'm on set, I do think about, am I going to include an Asian model today? And do I celebrate more Asian faces, more Asian crew? And I know that's important because I benefit from it in the industry when they celebrate us. When we're not, I just want us not to be the hot cake and hot potato for the moment. And it does happen in our industry. And I said this before on the show, that when the Oscar decided that we need to have more inclusion of Black people, the whole entire red carpet was Black people. And then a season later, it's like that never happened again. And same thing with the year that we need to have Asian people. I benefit from it. I actually got to host the red carpet at the Oscar because of it. And I prayed I would get hired back next year but that check mark has been checked, done, and is moved on. And
yeah,
that's when I get,
too often it's like a flavor of the month kind of mentality. And
I don't want to be a compound chicken for the month.
Yeah, exactly. And that's another reason why it's so important for people to exercise their voices and talk about the importance of diversity. And if you are empowered to be able to hire a diverse array of people, I mean, they have to be good, right? And they have to have the qualifications to be able to do the job, but be sensitive to that. I mean, at the end of the day, that will, your production, your whatever you're doing, I think will be so much better served for having an array of different people who are more of a reflection of this country and the world than isolating one single ethnic group.
Well, Lisa, I wanted you to close the month of celebration with me because that I knew that everybody would tune in and everybody would celebrate with me because you're with me. Things that when I posted that you would be with me, more Asian people reach out to me and said, I want to jump on this platform. I want to talk about my stories. I have chefs, I have makeup, hair. I have people from so many different industries, especially in the food industry, are dying to share the story about how the restaurants are closing because the immigrant workers and how that has affected the Chinese community, the marginalization of the restaurants, and it's because of you. So I have to thank you. So I don't stop celebrating Asian Heritage Month today. In fact, it's the new beginning of the celebration. And I'm making an effort every week that we'll have somebody representing the Asian community to come here to share whatever activism they're part of, or just simply sharing their personal story, because that it's truly the backbone of our culture and our heritage. 5,000 some years of it. We all cross over each other. You're part Taiwanese, I'm part Chinese. We're all connected. And if we can continue to celebrate that, I think we can be a little bit kinder to each other. And my goal is have Koreans, have Vietnamese, have all of them, Filipinos, because that's what I did in Asia's Next Top Model. We didn't just have one Asian race on the show. We wanted everybody from different regions and celebrate their beauty at the same time. And the only reason I even do that and think this way is because of you. And I truly, truly thank you so much for being here, validating the show itself, and also giving me the time to really learn more about you and be able to be proud, that I looked in the right mirror,
So thank you for your curiosity and your generosity, and inviting me to be on your show. It really means a lot to me, everything that you said and our conversation. So thank you.
Well, we'll keep the conversation going because I have your number now, so you're not running away from me. And the invitation is open for you to visit those labs and talk to them, whatever you want to learn from them, and they'll be so happy to have you. But thank you so much for starting the new celebration of the journey of Asian American heritage. And we'll continue to talk on Let's Talk. And thank you, Lisa, for your time. And I know it's a tough world out there, but for who you are and what you have done and continue to speak for those who don't have a voice, thank you so much. Together, we'll hope to make this place a nicer and kinder place.
Stay safe. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, guys, everyone. That was so educational, and I cannot tell you guys how incredible that was for me. For someone I've admired for so many years, and I've watched her career, I watch every single show, every move she makes, that makes me believe that I, too, one day can have a voice and have a platform, be able to share my stories with people. And because of her, I will continue to celebrate the Asian heritage here on Let's Talk. And I invite you guys, if you have stories that you want to share, please DM me. And it doesn't matter where you're at, where you're from. I think we all are going through all this at the same time, and sharing positivity and kindness to each other and sharing a little bit of vulnerability along the way, you'll bring all of us back together. Thank you guys again for watching, and I will see you again soon. Bye-bye.